B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Thursday, November 2nd, 2017. Important new evidence and testimony surfacing that the 2016 elections were rigged. The primary was rigged against Bernie Sanders, and the general election in November rigged against Hillary Clinton. We will air that out in today's News and Comment podcast. A couple of programming notes. Tomorrow, our live Facebook feed of the Daily News and Comment podcast will be delayed until 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. That may cut into party time for some of you folks on the East Coast, but I have a busy schedule earlier in the day, and that's the way it is working out. Also, I want to note that tomorrow I'll be releasing a powerful interview, the third in an unintentional trilogy about the sexual assault issues and cover-ups, along with retaliation against whistleblowers and witnesses at the Air Force Academy. But our top story today is about the rigged elections of 2016. And I want to commend Donna Brazile. I lost a lot of respect for her last year when she fed questions to the Clinton campaign because of her perch as a commentator at CNN, debate questions that Hillary would have been able to handle anyway. It was a stupid move. But then when she became chair of the Democratic National Committee, she maintained a kind of cover-up of the rigging against Bernie Sanders. And in some ways you can understand it. Hillary was given the nomination. She was in a brutal fight with Donald Trump. And it would have been inconvenient and unproductive to reveal this information a year ago. Nevertheless, her honor is something that we will have to see if it can truly be rehabilitated. But she has a new book out, and in an excerpt published by Politico today, she explains how the DNC had a secret agreement with the Clinton campaign, and they really hosed Bernie Sanders. Now, Brazile still maintains that the DNC was the subject of Russian hacks and not insider leaks. And she can believe that at her peril. But it's very interesting. She slimes Debbie Wasserman Schultz, saying that, well, Debbie had not been the most active chair in fundraising. She was not a good manager. She wasn't interested in controlling the party, and maybe that was passive-aggressive on Wasserman Schultz's part as her way of assisting the Clinton team. Well, what we learn is right after the convention, Donna Brazile learned from the chief finance officer of Hillary's campaign, Gary Gensler, that the DNC was broke and $2 million in debt, and that the Clinton campaign had been funding the DNC by loaning it as much as $20 million starting in August of 2015 when the agreement was signed. And that's when the rigging began in earnest. And you've heard me talk repeatedly about the George Clooney fundraiser, where George and his beautiful wife were allowed under the law to give $353,000 to the Hillary Victory Fund. Now, under federal law, only $2,700 per person can go to the candidates' committee. But by bending the rules, they claimed that the Victory Fund was a consortium of 32 state parties, and that $10,000 was split off for each of those states from a contribution of $353,000. And the balance, $33,400, was supposed to go to the financially troubled Democratic National Committee. But we knew this at the time, and there was a lawsuit that Sanders filed. I've never seen what happened to it. And when I've asked people who talk about the 2016 election as experts, what do you know about the way the money was laundered to help Hillary? Most people say, well, I really don't know. But Donna Brazile is taking us through what actually happened. After these fundraisers, the money would be transferred to the state committees, who then, almost in every case, transferred that money to the Clinton campaign, controlled from Brooklyn, not from the DNC headquarters in Washington. And Brazile notes that Robbie Mook, the campaign manager, made a deal with Debbie Wasserman Schultz quote, "We sent the party nearly $20 million from September until the convention, and then more to prepare for the election." And we do know from previous reporting that the money that should have gone to the DNC and the state committees and should not have been delivered to either the Sanders or the Clinton campaign until the contested primary was resolved, that money was used for digital advertising for Hillary Clinton, much of it during the primaries. Now, these appear to be deep violations of federal campaign law. Donna Brazile says, oh, no crime was committed. This is just morally ugly. It's ethically dirty. Well, I disagree with Ms. Brazile on that. She does assert the states kept less than 0.5% of the $82 million they had amassed from the extravagant fundraisers that Hillary's campaign was holding. Now, this is just part of the dirty action that was used to prevent Bernie Sanders from upsetting Hillary Clinton's entitlement to become the Democratic nominee. It was enabled by the superdelegates who insisted that Hillary was going to be the one to carry the flag over the line when they saw the polls that showed she was in trouble, showed that Sanders attracted a different a slice of the electorate and was likely to win against Trump. And so I've linked to the Politico excerpt from Donna Brazile's book. It's told in a warm and fuzzy personal way about how she had to make this awful phone call to Bernie Sanders to honor her agreement to get to the bottom of all this. But we now have the insider evidence, the testimony, to confirm what we have long suspected and what the emails, whoever hacked them, whoever stole them and released them via WikiLeaks, they gave us some insight to that, but we were all told, ignore that. That came from Russia. That's tainted. It might not be true. Well, Donna Brazile has done more than a limited hangout. But she hasn't fully hung it all out for us to see and for Sunlight to work on. And at Vice, they note this secret deal and that Donna Brazile is compromised. She certainly is, more credible than Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And we still await the investigation into her IT guy, Imran Awan, and where all that leads. But we know that Brazile fed the debate questions to the Clinton campaign, then denied it, and finally admitted in Time magazine in March of this year that she did share potential town hall topics with the Clinton campaign, which she will forever forget. Meanwhile, Mark Crispin Miller, professor of media and other stuff at New York University, sent out a blast the other day based on the work of Jonathan Simon, who I find a highly credible election analyst and number cruncher who's been on this podcast before. And Jonathan Simon was the first, along with Richard Charnan, to indicate that the primaries were rigged in favor of Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders in terms of the vote counting. And he used the unadjusted exit polls to show the wide variance in at least 8 states, as I recall, between the official tally and the unadjusted exit poll numbers. And that's what Jonathan Simon did with the general election numbers from November. And I'm going to quickly read you the top 10 or 12 states here, and the projected shift of the tally based on the exit polls as the standard and the vote count, the official vote count, as the variable. So, in Utah, almost 13% shift. Missouri, 10.7%. New Jersey, 9.0%. Ohio, 8.5%. Maine, 8.3%. South Carolina, 6.6%. North Carolina, 5.9%. Iowa, 5.7%. Pennsylvania, one of the 3 critical states that tilted the Electoral College to Trump, 5.6%. Wisconsin, which we covered with Ari Berman's Mother Jones piece the other day, the voter suppression angle contributed to the margin, But nevertheless, the variance between the official tally and the exit polls is 4.9% in Wisconsin. And in Michigan, where the margin was less than 12,000 votes, the shift is 0.3%. Now, this is not cold proof, but it is stunning evidence that should lead to deeper investigations, which, of course, neither party will support. I have linked to Mark Crispin Miller's dispatch that includes Jonathan Simon's statistics, and I encourage you to evaluate them for yourselves. And here's one more opinion on last year's election. It comes from Donald Trump's pollster. His name is Tony Fabrizio. And he told a Harvard University Institute of Politics event earlier this week that he believes Sanders would have defeated Trump in the general election. Sanders could have prevailed where Democratic nominee Clinton did not. Quote, "There's no question that if it had been anybody other than Clinton or anybody other than Trump, that race would not have been as close as it was either way. It would not have been." When asked what would happen during a Sanders-Trump matchup, Fabrizio replied, quote, "I think Sanders beats Trump. I think Sanders would have had the ability to reach a lot of the less than college-educated, low-income white voters." And at this point, I can't imagine that any of the Hillary or bust voters who rejected my commentary and my warnings that Trump could win when I gave them last year are still listening. But on the off chance that you are, I'm not gloating. There's nothing to gloat about. But please take a hard look at the way you were used, abused, and manipulated by the Clinton campaign and by the corporate media last year. They had a hand in making Sanders look old and grumpy and out of touch. Consider the April 1st editorial board meeting where they tried to make it look like Bernie didn't know how to break up the banks. And that was seized upon by the Clinton campaign and amplified the way that Russian bots are alleged to have helped Trump in the general election. Sayfullo Saipov, who is the suspect in the truck incident in New York on Monday that left 8 people dead, he is the subject of a new report by Trevor Aronson. And I was tipped off by the early reporting that Saipov was reportedly on the FBI's radar in some manner. And I've linked to Trevor Aronson's article, which is at The Intercept today, where he explains that many Uzbeks were under observation, suspicion by the FBI, and that may have led to links to Saipov through other Uzbekis. The FBI has acknowledged that Saipov was known to federal agents as a result of his contact with another Uzbek man who was under investigation for links to terrorism in New York. And Aronson notes that Omar Mateen, who is the alleged attacker in the nightclub shooting in Orlando last year, was subjected to a brief investigation, a threat assessment, in the same way that it's believed Saipov was. The Department of Justice has prosecuted 9 Uzbeks on terrorism-related charges since 2011, including one Alabama man who was looking for a way to kill Barack Obama. And what's interesting is when you look at the range of cases involving Uzbek suspects, they're all pretty blatant about, yeah, I sympathize with the Islamic State. I want to go there and fight with them. They're a little bit unusual. And we do see the role of paid FBI informants who showed up at mosques and intercepted some of these people. In terms of the specifics to this suspect, it's still a little bit murky, but I think that Aronson does a good job of explaining the recent history of FBI interaction with Uzbek suspects here in the United States. And when we look at Saipov, well, he was read his Miranda rights, and he waived them, began talking to investigators in the hospital almost immediately, And based on the charges that were filed, it is believed that he told the agents that he began planning the attack about a year ago. He did a dry run in a Home Depot rental truck a week ago. He chose Halloween as the time to do it because he thought more people would be on the streets. And he's asked for an Islamic State flag to display in his hospital room. Now, some of this makes you think that the guy's a little nutty. And, of course, we always examine the mental health of white Americans who shoot and kill a bunch of people. And I think it's an open question about to what extent Saipov is mentally ill. He's got 3 kids and a wife, and he's never going to probably see them in an unlocked setting again. Then there's Trump, who has abandoned the historic role of presidents who are very cautious about making comments that could poison a jury pool or otherwise taint the prosecution of a high-profile suspect like this. Trump's been on Twitter again. There's something appropriate about keeping him in the home of the horrible crime he committed, and that's a reference to Trump having rejected sending him to Guantanamo to face trial at a military commission. Anyway, Trump says, should move fast, and then in all caps, death penalty, exclamation point. And his explanation, would love to send the New York City terrorist to Guantanamo, but statistically, that process takes much longer than going through the federal system. Well, that's the wrong argument for the right choice. I'm glad they're not going to send him to Guantanamo. There are a whole range of issues that come into play, including whether the military commissions are in any way appropriate for a legal U.S. resident like Saipov. And there's a real problem because the kangaroos are rebelling in the kangaroo court for the accused bomber of the USS Cole at Guantanamo Bay. And, you know, I often criticize Rachel Maddow for the Russia, Russia, Russia telenovela that she delivers every night on MSDNC. But last night, I was wowed. She put the Russian story later in the hour, even though she had Adam Schiff for another big interview. And she used the work of the Miami Herald's talented reporter, Carol Rosenberg, who, together with Andy Worthington in Britain, are the 2 most dedicated journalists to the issues related to Guantanamo. So I've linked to Rosenberg's article published today, and there is an appeal before a U.S. District Court judge in Washington, D.C., because the number 2 lawyer in the military, Brigadier General John Baker, who has been serving as the chief defense counsel for the military commissions, is currently locked up under the orders of a lower-ranking officer who is presiding over the Cole trial at Guantanamo. This is so bizarre. And the judge in the case, whose name is Colonel Vance Spath, is really going off the rails. He tried to order General Baker to order 3 defense attorneys who had resigned from defending al-Nashiri, the suspect in the Cole bombing, because they believe that they have been compromised. Now, some of this is not spelled out because of the secrecy requirements, but it's believed that the defense attorneys were monitored when they held legal meetings with their client, which is a gross violation of American law and the fundamentals of attorney-client privilege. So General John Baker, he allowed these 3 lawyers to resign. Then he was called on the carpet by the judge, Vance Spath, who then sentenced the Marine general to 21 days confinement in his quarters, a trailer at behind the Guantanamo courthouse. And it is the Brigadier General John Baker who has brought a habeas corpus charge or case before the federal court in Washington, D.C., seeking relief. He also challenged Spath, saying, look, these military commissions don't have jurisdiction over me because I'm an American citizen. And so Baker's due process rights are being denied. The judge has gone bonkers, imagining that he can order lawyers who feel they have been compromised to continue to work on litigation, on defense of al-Nashiri. And this could lead to a showdown as soon as tomorrow, because the 3 lawyers who quit have been ordered to report to an office building in Alexandria, Virginia, to continue to conduct the trial by video conference. And the lowest ranking lawyer on the team, who has admitted that he has no experience running a capital case, he stood up to Judge Spath and said, "No, I will not take over this case." So there is a massive rebellion against the judge in this trial, who continues to operate like a and ignores the rule of law. I've never seen anything like this before. Every day I pause and thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. People like Janet Price, Tim McKay, Joey Perillo, and Wendy Gebauer. They all kick in $5 or $10 a month because they value the work that I do here, and I appreciate that. It's not only validation, but it helps pay the bills. And next week, Raul is coming in. He's promised me on Tuesday to finally install the new mixer and help upgrade our audio facilities here at the Secret Studio. So I'm grateful to my supporters. I need more, and that includes you. So come on over to peterbcollins.com, click on the menu button, pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber, and boom, you're at the sign-up page where you can make some choices. We have been following the idle speculation of many experts on YouTube and in social media about the causes of the wildfires in the wine country here in Northern California that broke out on the night of October 8th. And the wild speculation includes particle beam, directed energy weapons, weather modification, smart meters, the UN Agenda 21. I mean, I've heard it all. But the most likely suspect has been identified. And these are devices that are called reclosers. They're like an automated circuit breaker. And the idea is when a specific power circuit on the grid blacks out, that the system attempts to reboot itself, to restart itself, to turn the electricity back on. Now, the only case where this is risky is if the wind blows a power line down, the power line is dead, but this device called the recloser sends jolts of electricity down the line to see if it can restart that circuit. Well, those jolts in contact with branches or trees or brush are the likely cause of these fires. And get this, the other 2 utilities in California, San Diego Gas and Electric and Southern California Edison, they have policies that turn off the reclosers during the high-risk fire season, which is known to occur every October here in California. And State Senator Jerry Hill, who fought PG&E over the deadly gas pipeline fires that afflicted one of his communities in San Mateo, an area called San Bruno, about 5-7 years ago, he said, frankly, not turning off the reclosers could have started many, if not all, of the fires. Well, you wouldn't know it because the Trump administration has cut the budget for promotion of Obamacare offerings and sign-ups during open enrollment by 90%. They also rewrote the language on the website and in emails that go out to people at renewal time to basically go neutral, if not negative. And this is part of the overall effort to kill Obamacare. But what they're not telling members of the public in many states is that, for example, due to the effort to kill Obamacare, in many states, the gold plan is cheaper than the silver plan, and the gold plan obviously provides better coverage with lower deductibles and copays. But Trump has also cut off funding for the people who are helping enroll customers, help walking them through the website to understand the differences between various policies. And so this is an insidious effort that will leave people uninsured, that will further damage the Affordable Care Act marketplaces, and they're intended to discourage people from signing up for programs that will continue into 2018 at least. And in my own case, while the cost of insurance went up by almost 6%, my net monthly premium is projected to drop by $200 in January. So please don't be discouraged. If you are seeking coverage, if you've looked for it in the past, they won't send you an email. Last year they would have, this year they won't. So take the initiative, and the sign-up period has been shortened. It ends, I believe, on December 15th. Oh, yeah, the Republicans unveiled their half-baked proposals to cut corporate taxes and to shift the tax code to benefit the super wealthy at the expense of working Americans. And because I don't think that these proposals will ever become the final bill, and I do think they'll ram something through and call it a victory for the Republicans, what I want to note today is that already key constituencies are saying, hey, wait a minute, this needs more work, which is code for these ideas suck. The National Association of Realtors, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, natural constituencies of Republicans, natural supporters of tax cuts, they're saying, wait a minute. Because the idea of cutting the deductibility of mortgage interest in half, limiting property tax deductions, particularly in high-tax states like California, eliminating the ability to write off state income and sales taxes against your federal income for tax purposes. These are really hot-button issues that caused 20 Republicans to defect from the vote on the House budget bill last week. And if we hang in there, we may see another big failure of Republican legislative initiatives on their effort to cut taxes. One of the ones that I see in a bullet point here that I've got to do more research on, the proposal would eliminate deductions for medical expenses and property and casualty losses. Wow, that can hurt a whole lot of people. A couple of quickies. Some people in the Trump administration, some out. Trump announced today he'll nominate Jerome H. Powell to replace Janet Yellen as chair of the Federal Reserve. Powell is a member of the Fed's Board of Governors for 5 years now and is a Republican with deep roots in the party's establishment and in the financial industry. He used to work for an investment bank, Dillon Read and Company. We'll see where all that goes. Sam Clovis has withdrawn his nomination to be the top scientist at the Department of Agriculture. Now, he was grossly unqualified, and we all knew that. But Trump Co. was pressing forward with his confirmation until Bob Mueller released the plea deal with George Papadopoulos on Monday that includes emails from Sam Clovis, the agriculture nominee, saying, nice work. Nice work arranging a potential meeting with the Russians. Meetings that we don't believe ever happened, and this may evaporate. But it brings things too close to Trump, and so Clovis has dropped out. And Pat Leahy nailed it, senator from Vermont and chair of the Agriculture Committee, ranking member, I guess. He is arguably unqualified. He is wrong on almost every major issue relevant to the chief scientist post to which he was nominated. His nomination is all too typical of the anti-science agenda and the know-nothingism pushed by President Trump and his administration. Big old Chris Christie has come out with the report of his opioid commission, calling for more drug courts, more training for doctors, penalties for insurers who dodge covering addiction treatment. But not a single additional dollar is demanded. Now, in a backhanded way, Christie urges Congress to fund what is called the Public Health Emergency Fund. It currently has $57,000. That is less than $1 for every American, the 64,000, who died from drug overdoses last year. It's insulting, and it's shameful. In the same vein, 7 Democrats in the U.S. Senate have introduced legislation to slow the revolving door between the Drug Enforcement Administration, other federal agencies that regulate the pharmaceutical industry. It would require a 2-year cooling-off period on former officials from DEA and FDA before they could take 7-figure jobs selling out their expertise to the industries that they previously had regulated. And Democrats in the House are using an arcane law from 1928 to demand to see the records of the lease between the government's General Services Administration and the Trump International Hotel, which is on the site of the former old post office in Washington, D.C. And this could get interesting because they're able to work around the chairs of the Oversight Committee who are not willing to subpoena this information. They're using this 1928 law, which is called the 7-member rule. It specifically says that any 7 members of the Oversight Committee, regardless of party, can sign a request that an agency must comply with. And finally today, in Spain, a judge in Madrid has issued warrants to lock up at least 8 of the separatist leaders from Catalonia. In all, the Attorney General wants to prosecute 20 Catalan separatists, including the former leader, Carles Puigdemont, who is currently in Brussels, Belgium, and ignored a summons to appear in court in Madrid today. So the judge, whose name is Carmen Lamela, approved an arrest warrant for Puigdemont, 4 other politicians who left for Belgium, and 8 who are still in Spain have been put in jail without bail. Thanks for joining me today for my daily news and comment podcast. It's free, and you're free to share it far and wide. It's also available on YouTube for your convenience. I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.